to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley with the Business Blueprint, and this is part 2 of our discussion on tough conversations. I'm joined today with Rebecca Malone. Last week we ended talking about your physical safety when you're having these tough conversations. Just the obvious. If you're bigger than everybody else, you want to make sure that they feel safe. If you're smaller than the people you're talking to, you want to make sure that you have a safe exit. You always want to make sure to have a witness and, if possible, have agreement that the conversation is going to be recorded in some fashion. Use the technologies that are available to us. One of the speaking of safety is I had another incident where the person, literally, you could see it in their face. They were going to do something physically violent. Have you ever been in that situation, Rebecca?
Fortunately not. I've certainly had some very upset people, but, through just maintaining neutrality and keeping it to no, this is what we need to do next, and this is next, and this is next, and now we're done. Now you walk out the door and we're done. So was able to keep things relatively de-escalated by using that. But no, I've never had anybody really get to that point, fortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think people look at violence as sometimes an answer right now. And it's important because when you're having tough conversations with people, they go home. Everybody does this. They go home and they ruminate. They think about it. And they get angry. Well, I should have said this. I should have said that. Mm-hmm. That's why, when I'm having a tough conversation with somebody, if it's not a termination event, I try to set up a time to talk to them the next day or the day after to give them that opportunity to vent, right? They want to vent. They want to get their 2 cents in. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really hurt me to give them that opportunity to think about it and come back and say, well, I don't agree with your assessment on my availability because I was available on these days. Okay, great. But you weren't the other days, right? He's like, oh, okay, well, I was. Okay, well, we agree. And then once the emotion hopefully is dying down, you can say, but you realize I'm doing this because I truly want you to succeed and hopefully move on. So I think it's important to give that second opportunity. How do you have tough conversations with vendors? So it's easy in terms of an employee, right? You go to, like, the manager will go to the employee kind of will probably be available to the manager. The person you're having a problem with is directly there. You walk to the person you have a problem with, and you say, I'm having a problem with you because of X, Y, and Z, and you walk away. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with tough conversations with vendors?
So making sure that everybody that needs to be in the room is in the room. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily having just a one-on-one with the point of contact that you're primarily dealing with, but making sure that their manager, maybe an owner, maybe, whoever it is, someone that could actually do something about it is on the call with you, and that everybody's on the same page as far as what the call is going to be about. And so recently I had a vendor conversation where it started out with just the point of contact and saying, well, we're unhappy for these reasons. And then saying we need to set up another call. And then we set that up. We had the 3 other people or whoever needed to be there. And I sent them a bunch of stuff in advance and said, these are the specific problems that I'm having. And, here's the date, here's the transaction, here's what the result was. And, this is the reason why I'm unhappy and why I'm setting up this call, so that we're not getting into the room and everybody being surprised and them saying, oh, well, we had no idea what was going on, right? No, I'm sending you that a week in advance so you have time to review it and figure it out on your end. And we can come to the table and say, why did this happen? And not just sit there and have them go, oh, well, I don't know. And we have to look into it and then get back to you, because that's not what we're here to do. So that's my approach. You don't want to be too insulting to the person that you may have to continue working with, but you do want to be clear on what the issues are. And so not necessarily pointing the finger to say, well, she didn't do this, but to say, well, this is the issue. and, how do we resolve this? How do we avoid this in the future? And I'm not receiving the benefit of the service that I paid for, right? Because I'm having to come back to you and point out all of these issues that I'm dealing with. So how are we going to reconcile that? And so that, I think, for the most part, is the most successful way of doing it. I don't think going in and saying, you're terrible and I'm going to go hire somebody else. Now there's no incentive for them to come back and fix anything. So you want it to progress, if it can, to a successful resolution. I want them to fix the problem. I want to avoid the problem in the future, and I want to continue working together as professionals. And so that's my viewpoint in going in, is let's tackle the problem and not necessarily just attack like, well, you're horrible. Because if somebody came to me and said, you're horrible, I'd say, then fire me. You know what I mean? Like there's no getting around that. If you think I'm horrible, then how do we ever move forward together? But if it's, I have a problem with this and the timing of that and the delivery of X service, okay, then I can work with that and we can fix that and figure it out.
Yeah, it is important to, if there is a middle ground, allow the middle ground to be created, right? Now if somebody has been lying to you or stealing money from you, there may not be a middle ground. It may be, hey, this call is a termination call. Bye. And I'm recording it so that because I'm going to be suing you. You stole money from me.
Right.
I don't ever advise somebody to go into a conversation and say, I'm going to sue you. You just do it. You don't have to tell them you're going to do it.
Sure.
But a tough thing with vendors is the owner or the person who's actually a decision maker in a lot of B2B type industries may not always be available to you, or they will purposely not be available to you, because what I have noticed in being in B2B relationships is a lot of the vendors will purposely throw up their customer representative because they know you as the client aren't going to attack the customer representative. They know that it's going to keep you at bay, and now another month has gone by where you've paid them. Another month has gone by because they're not available, and another month has gone by, and before you know it, you're a quarter or half a year into something where you're unhappy, and your representative is usually a very nice person on purpose, right? They hire very nice, charismatic people to be your representative. Is the one that they know that you're not going to yell at that person. I had a meeting one time where the decision, the person was there, but then still tried to get somebody else to answer the questions I was asking. And I was like, no, you answer the question in front of that person's whole team. And, that person said I embarrassed them, but they were the ones that should have been answering the question. We had a vendor who, a very high level person at the company called our marketing assistant and to complain about me. Like, don't ever call somebody to complain about somebody higher in the company. If you want to complain about me, call me. And they didn't want to do that. And we had a vendor recently that, we were going back and forth about all the issues that we're having. And they threw up their poor customer service person who was like, so just so I'm clear, what problems are we having? Like, wow. Do you want to go back over the last 2 months of emails? And so what our COO did was, cut that conversation off. No point to have this conversation. Not going to waste my time. And went directly to that company's COO and I believe to their CEO to try to find a resolution and demanded a meeting, right? You have to be confident enough in your situation when you're dealing with vendors to have these tough conversations, but to demand a meeting to the person that owns the company. You're paying them. Even if you're a small fish, you feel like you're a small fish, you're still paying them a lot of money. And it's money that you could probably be using towards better resources if you're getting a bad service somewhere. How do you handle it, Rebecca, when things come back? And we get this all the time. I think one of the toughest conversations is, well, you said this or so-and-so said this. And you're like, I didn't say that. Now I have to go have this conversation with this person. I have to go find out, who said what, when, where, and why. How do you handle those conversations?
So the best thing to do is say, do you have an email? You have a record, right? Most of the things I say, I put them in an email. I put them in some sort of writing so that everybody knows what's going on. Recently I emailed out a reminder about a policy because I knew there was a few different questions coming up and just wanted to make sure everybody's clear across the board. This is what it is. This is what the rules are. everybody has the exact same answer. Everybody has the exact same information. So now if someone comes and says, oh, well, Rebecca told me I could do X, Y, or Z. No, I absolutely did not, because everybody received the exact same email outlining the exact same policy with the exact same rules. So if you're saying you had some sort of exception, that would be written down somewhere. I wouldn't just offhand say, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to you, because that's not the reason that we have policies and procedures. So making sure that it's in writing, making sure that your policies clarify that any exception has to be documented in writing, right? Our policy is X, and if you want an exception, you have to request it in writing, and it has to be granted in writing. And that way there can't be any of the he said, she said, I was confused, I thought you said this, and you meant that, or whatever. No, it's right there in the policy. Where's the email? So if there's no email, didn't happen.
My favorite is, oh, well, Charles is at the office and he said this. And, it's something absurd that I would never say in a million years. And, unfortunately, I think you also have to remember that having just brief conversations with people, when you're the business owner or you're a high-level management, those aren't just off-the-cuff conversations to the person hearing the conversation. They are, hey, the owner told me this. Even if you're like, oh, man, I hope you have a good day. Well, the owner told me to have a good day. And I think that's a weird evolution of watching the business grow, is shrinking the circle of people that you can have flippant conversations with. How have you adjusted to that?
I don't know. I guess naturally over time, you do get a little bit worn out from hearing things come back to you that weren't said or were taken out of context or were confused about or things like that. And so it's just, you try to be super clear on exactly what you're saying, when you're saying it, and then following up with emails. And that way everybody can be on the same page and we can all move forward.
Yeah, you just have to be very careful, right? Even what is a flippant conversation to you, it turns out to be something that you can't have a conversation with somebody. For example, I was sitting in a meeting yesterday, not a meeting that was my meeting. I don't want to use the word audit, but occasionally I like to sit in meetings and just get a feel for what's going on. And I take notes and, usually give feedback to whomever's in charge of that team's meetings. And they had a question that I knew the answer to. And they turned to me and they said, hey, by the way, we have this question. And I was like, oh, well, you'll have to, instead of subverting the proper channels to get that information, I think you'll have to go through so-and-so to get that. I just always say, I don't know. You're going to have to go through so-and-so. And, I think one of the hardest things for me is when somebody asks me a question, I want to give an answer. When somebody needs something done, I just do it. And that is not always the most helpful way to lead people. And it often leads to tougher conversations, right? So for the example, if I had just given the answer that I knew, it may have undercut the work that their particular team leader was doing. Their particular team leader may have been waiting to share that information for a very valid reason. Their team leader may have had a different plan for the distribution of that information for very, very good reasons. And I just subverted that team leader. And what's going to happen in the future is that people will start going around their team leader to try to come to the person they know is going to give them the quickest answer. And that is something within our organization that we're always struggling with, is we want you to ask the right person, right? So that we can have one line of information flowing, or we can control the people that are flowing information on purpose, because it cuts back on tough conversations. So how do you do that? And I know that's kind of an open question. How do you get people to ask the right person the right question?
Right. So being really clear in all of your training and in all of your activities and everything else, that this is, everything goes through your team leader. I don't care if it's a question about your chair that you sit in or about your keyboard or whatever it is, right? Any kind of silly thing. It all goes through one point of contact. And then if it needs to be sent to somebody else, then it gets sent to somebody else from there. But that way, also, all of your team leaders understand what's going on across departments. So they don't just stick in their tunnel vision of, okay, I'm in charge of marketing. I'm only ever going to think about marketing, and I'm never going to think about HR or equipment or anything else, right? That isn't in my exact line. Well, now you understand what goes on over there. And so for our whole concept is we want to flatten out our organization and not have everybody be in their own little bubble of this is what I do and I never touch or interact with anybody else ever. We want everybody to understand the function of each section of the business. Then having it all go through that team lead means they're going to have a better understanding of what's going on across the entirety of the organization.
It does. And, I'm a big proponent of the depillarization of a company, right? I don't want, when you have somebody on the marketing team to have to then email the marketing manager, who then emails the director of marketing, who then can email the director of operations, who can then email the manager, who can then email the person that these two people could have just communicated, right? Mm-hmm. But, the problem that we saw was there was more than one answer floating. Something as silly as what we thought was a very good inclement weather policy, right? Look at the government building where your office is in the same county your office is located. If that government building is closed, we're closed. Our office is closed. Come to find out, people were getting different answers. So, was it the Mecklenburg County office or was it the Mecklenburg City office? Which office are we talking about? And when the office is closed, does that mean that we get just a day off, an extra day off, or are we supposed to work from home? Mm-hmm. Things that we thought were very clear, we had just 4, 5, 6 different answers floating. And so by cutting down on the number of people, being very clear, talk to your team leader. Here's who your team leader is. Really started that idea of trying to cut back on these tough conversations when you look at somebody's productivity on a day that there was inclement weather, and you then have to go back and say, why didn't you do anything? And they're like, well, the office was closed. So just work from home, man. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't know that. And then you're banging your head against the wall saying it's page 37 of the employee handbook that you sign every year. We literally have you sign it every year, and it emails you a copy. And they're like, yeah, but so-and-so told me. And then you have to go have a tough conversation with so-and-so. Why did you say that? Why in the world would you ever say that? So, some ways to get around tough conversations is to be proactive, right? Mm-hmm. And, the more proactive you are in making sure that, people have, like you said with the PIP, make sure people know what to expect from you. Hey, I need you to answer your phone until 5 o'clock. If you don't answer your phone at 5 o'clock, this isn't the job for you. We don't have to get in a fight about it. This just isn't the job for you. And we can shake hands and walk away and be best friends still and do what was a tough conversation, but turn it into a positive for both sides. So, Rebecca, I want to thank you for having a tough conversation with me about tough conversations. There's never a right way to have a tough conversation. It's always going to be based off the 2 individuals involved in the conversation, 3 individuals. You want to remember to keep your emotions out of it, document, put it in writing, and have a witness. So if you enjoyed this episode of the Business Blueprint, please subscribe. We always like to talk about things that are going on in our world, in our business, and share them with you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Some of our content is created off those comments. So we always appreciate people, asking questions. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.